My name is Bree, and this is the story of the day my family finally showed me exactly where I stood in their lives. I arrived at my sister Gabby's wedding expecting to celebrate, to toast to her happiness, to do what I always did, play the role of the supportive sister despite everything. But from the moment I walked through those doors, something felt wrong. And then I saw it. My seat. Not at the family table. Not even in the main reception hall, but shoved into the hallway near the restrooms. At first, I thought it was a mistake. But it wasn't. It was a message. A message that said I didn't matter. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But here's the thing about pushing someone aside for too long. Eventually, they stop trying to fit in. So I made a choice that day. And what happened after? Well, let's just say it shocked everyone, especially when they realized what I took with me. I pulled into the parking lot of the Grand Pavilion, my fingers gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles had turned white. The exclusive waterfront venue overlooked Lake Michigan, its stone facade and sweeping gardens making it the perfect backdrop for what Chicago's social scene was calling the wedding of the year. Everything about this wedding screamed extravagance. Everything except for my presence. With a deep breath, I stepped out of my car, smoothing down my burgundy dress. I'd spent weeks finding the perfect outfit. Something elegant but not flashy. Something that would help me blend in without drawing attention. I wasn't here to cause drama. I wasn't here to make this about me. It was Gabby's day, and I had accepted long ago that I wasn't the favorite daughter. I just hadn't expected them to remind me of it in such a public, humiliating way. Inside the grand entryway, a wedding coordinator with an artificially bright smile greeted me at the check-in table. "Name?" she chirped, tablet in hand. "Bree?" My voice came out calm, controlled. "Bree Winters." Her smile faltered just a little. My stomach tightened as she scrolled through the seating chart. Then something flashed across her face. Pity. I knew that look. I hated that look. "Oh, right. Here you are," she said, handing me a small place card. "You're, seated right over here." She hesitated, then pointed toward a hallway just outside the grand ballroom. I frowned. "Excuse me?" She forced another smile. "Your table is just outside the main reception area." My eyes darted to the massive seating chart displayed on an ornate easel beside her. Susan and Thomas Winters, my parents, were seated at the front table, next to the bride and groom. Gabby's college roommates, Austin's distant cousins, even his boss's wife, all had seats inside the ballroom. My name wasn't there. I turned back to the coordinator. "There must be a mistake." Her smile tightened. "I'm afraid that's your assigned seat." A slow burn started in my chest, not even at a distant table inside the ballroom. No, they had shoved me into the hallway, as if I were an afterthought, like a guest they had to accommodate out of obligation, not family. Still, I held on to some ridiculous hope that this was just an oversight, that maybe, just maybe, my own mother hadn't allowed this to happen. I spotted her across the room, standing with Gabby, beaming as she adjusted the intricate beading on her dress. My sister looked radiant, perfect, adored, just as she had always been. Gabby caught my gaze, tilted her head, then smirked. That smirk told me everything I needed to know. I forced myself forward. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice light. "Can I talk to you for a second?" Susan barely spared me a glance. "Oh, darling, now's not the time. Can't you see we're busy?" "It'll only take a second," I said through gritted teeth. She sighed, annoyed but obliging, and stepped aside. Gabby didn't move, of course. She just watched, her smirk growing. "I just checked my seat," I said. "It's in the hallway." Susan let out a dismissive hum. Well, we had to prioritize immediate family members at the main tables, Bree. I blinked. Immediate family? I am immediate family. Susan let out a forced, airy laugh, as if I'd said something absurd. Oh, sweetheart, don't be so dramatic. Gabby finally spoke. Did they mess up your seat? Wow, that's unfortunate. Her voice dripped with false sympathy. You know how chaotic wedding planning can be. So many little details, things get overlooked. Her eyes glowed with amusement. She knew this wasn't an accident. I turned back to my mother. Mom, you really think it's okay for me to be seated outside the reception hall, away from everyone? Susan sighed again, clearly bored with the conversation. Bree, don't make a big deal out of this. It's Gabby's special day. Just be grateful you're here. Grateful. The word lodged itself in my throat, bitter and unspoken. Be grateful for being treated like a second-class guest at my own sister's wedding. Be grateful for being discarded, shoved aside, forgotten. I opened my mouth, but Thomas, my father, my ever-passive, conflict-avoiding father, finally spoke. It's just seating, sweetheart, he said, not even looking at me. Let's not ruin the mood. That was it. That was all he had to say. I didn't even bother responding. What was the point? A new voice broke the silence. That's an interesting arrangement. I turned and found Renee, Austin's mother, standing nearby, champagne in hand. Her eyes flickered toward Gabby, then back to me, her expression unreadable. Gabby stiffened slightly. Susan gave Renee a rehearsed, gracious smile. Oh, Renee, you know how tricky wedding planning can be. We tried our best to accommodate everyone. Renee hummed, unconvinced. She looked at me just a second too long, as if reading between the lines. I didn't know what that meant yet, but I held her gaze. Gabby looped her arm through my mother's, effortlessly steering the conversation away. Mom, we should really check on the flowers before the ceremony starts. And just like that, I was dismissed. The ballroom around me was alive with laughter, clinking glasses, and music. A celebration I wasn't truly a part of. I was here, but not welcome. I walked away, my pulse hammering, not toward my assigned table, not toward the hallway. I reached for the place card in my hand, staring at my own name printed in elegant gold script. I turned it over once, then again, before slowly setting it down on a nearby tray. If they thought I was just going to accept this, they didn't know me at all. And they certainly had no idea what I was capable of taking from them. I stared at the dimly lit hallway, my back pressed against the cold wall, fingers tightening around the smooth fabric of my dress. Laughter, clinking glasses, and distant music spilled from the grand ballroom, a world I was never truly a part of. The isolation wasn't new. The humiliation, though, sharper this time, felt oddly familiar, like an old wound being sliced open again. This wasn't an accident. They wanted me to feel small, insignificant, and damn it, they succeeded. The sting in my chest spread, not just from this moment but from years of being the second choice, the afterthought. My mind drifted back, pulling me into the past before I could stop it. I slipped out the side door, needing fresh air, needing space to think. The gardens were immaculate, roses and lilies arranged in perfect formation, much like the hierarchy in my family. Everyone in their designated place. Everyone except me. They don't deserve your tears. I turned, startled to find Renee standing, a few feet away, her silk dress catching the golden late-afternoon light. I hadn't realized I was crying until she mentioned it. I quickly wiped my cheeks. I'm not crying, I lied, straightening my shoulders. Just needed some air. Renee's smile was gentle but knowing. The hallway table was Gabby's idea, wasn't it? I hesitated, not wanting to seem petty by bad-mouthing my sister at her own wedding. But something about Renee's direct gaze made me think she already knew the answer. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Most likely, I admitted. Gabby has always had a flair for subtle cruelty. Renee nodded, taking a sip of her champagne. I've noticed. Austin doesn't see it yet, but Mother's... She paused, her eyes meeting mine. We recognize patterns others miss. For a moment, we stood in silence, the weight of her words settling between us. I wondered if she was seeing something I couldn't, if her perspective as an outsider gave her clarity about my family that I lacked after years of conditioning. Have you always been the one they push aside? She asked finally, her voice softer now, genuinely curious rather than pitying. The question caught me off guard. Most people didn't see it, or if they did, they pretended not to. The Winters family presented a perfect image to the world: successful business, beautiful daughters, charitable contributions. Nobody asked about the shadows behind that image. For as long as I can remember, I said, surprised by my own honesty. She's always been the golden child. And what have you been? I laughed, a short, bitter sound. The backup plan, the afterthought. The one who's expected to show up, smile, and stay in her lane. Renee considered this, her eyes sharp with intelligence. And yet here you are, still playing your part. It's her wedding day, I said, the excuse sounding hollow even to my own ears. Is it? Renee raised an eyebrow. Or is it just another opportunity for her to remind you of your place in their eyes? Her bluntness was startling, but oddly refreshing. For years, I'd navigated my family's subtle cruelties, the gaslighting, the dismissals. Having someone name it so directly felt like suddenly being able to breathe after years underwater. Why are you talking to me about this? I asked, genuinely curious. You barely know me. Renee's expression shifted, something unreadable flickering across her face. Let's just say I recognize the dynamics at play, and... She hesitated, seeming to choose her words carefully. I'm concerned about what kind of wife my son is getting. What kind of family he's marrying into. Before I could respond, the wedding planner appeared at the garden entrance, gesturing urgently toward Renee. Mrs. Henderson, we need you for the family photos. Renee nodded, then turned back to me. Will I see you inside? I glanced toward the ballroom, my assigned hallway seat looming in my mind. I'm not sure yet. She studied me for a moment longer, then reached into her clutch, pulling out a business card. If you ever want to talk about anything, call me. She pressed it into my palm, her fingers cool against mine. Sometimes the perspective of someone outside the family can be illuminating. As she walked away, I stared down at the card. Renee Henderson, CEO, Henderson Tech Industries. Below her name, a personal cell number had been handwritten. I slipped it into my purse, an unexpected lifeline in a sea of rejection. Back inside, guests were beginning to take their seats for the ceremony. I stood at the periphery, watching as my family posed for photos, their smiles practiced and perfect. Susan straightening Thomas's tie, Gabby centerpiece perfect in her designer gown, Austin looking handsome but somehow slightly bewildered, as if he couldn't quite believe his good fortune. None of them looked for me. None of them noticed my absence. I slipped into the back row of the ceremony seating, far from my assigned spot, determined to witness this day on my own terms. As the music swelled and the processional began, I watched my sister walk down the aisle on our father's arm, the epitome of bridal perfection. But something in Renee's words had shifted something in me. For the first time, I wasn't seeing Gabby through the lens of childhood admiration and envy. I was seeing her as she truly was: beautiful, yes, but calculating. The slight tightness around her eyes when she smiled at Austin. The way her gaze darted to the audience, making sure all attention was focused where it belonged, on her. And for the first time, I didn't envy her at all. The ceremony progressed just as planned. Vows exchanged, rings slipped onto fingers. The kiss that launched 1,000 camera flashes. I watched it all from my back row seat, feeling increasingly like a stranger observing actors in a play. When it ended and guests streamed toward the reception, I slipped away in the opposite direction. I found myself in a quiet corridor of the Grand Pavilion, away from the celebration. My assigned hallway seat waited for me, but I couldn't bring myself to sit there, to accept such a public slight. Instead, I wandered, heels clicking softly against the marble floor, until I came across a small library the venue kept for private meetings and quiet moments. I stepped inside, grateful for the silence. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, leather-bound volumes adding warmth to the elegant space. I sank into a velvet armchair, finally letting out the breath I felt like I'd been holding all day. My phone buzzed with a text from Susan. "Where are you? You're missing the reception entrance." I stared at the message without responding. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel that immediate rush to please, to apologize, to hurry back to take my designated place in their shadow. Instead, my mind drifted to a memory I'd long tried to suppress, the day I discovered just how deliberately I'd been sidelined in my own family. 2 years ago, I was back at my parents' house, searching through the attic for an old photo album. I hadn't been home in months, and it showed. Dust gathered in corners, my childhood belongings boxed up and pushed to the back, making room for more of Gabby's things. Everything before I stopped trying. I wasn't searching for anything significant, just killing time while my mother finished whatever elaborate lunch she was preparing for Gabby's visit. It was always about Gabby. The attic was stifling in the summer. Heat, dust particles dancing in the slanted rays of sunlight that filtered through the small window. Most of my childhood had been packed away in unlabeled boxes, while Gabby's ice skating trophies, debate team medals, and high school memorabilia were displayed prominently on custom shelving. I rifled through a box labeled Family Photos, hoping to find something from before the dynamic solidified, before I understood where I stood in the family hierarchy. And that's when I saw it. A small wooden chest I'd never noticed before, tucked behind some old curtains. Something about the way it was hidden, as if it were important, as if it mattered, made me reach for it. The chest was locked, but the key was taped to the bottom. Not very secure, but enough to keep casual snoopers out. My hands trembled slightly as I turned the key, unsure what I was about to discover. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, lay a collection of family heirlooms. My grandmother's pearl necklace that Susan had always promised would be mine someday. The vintage sapphire ring that had belonged to my great-aunt Lena, the one Thomas had told me was lost years ago. A delicate silver locket with a faded photograph of my grandparents. Beneath these treasures was a folded document. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. It was my grandfather's will, the one I'd been told left everything to my parents. But there, in clear black and white, was the truth. To my beloved granddaughter Brianna, I leave my family jewelry collection and 20% shares in Winters Holdings. I sat there, stunned. The jewelry, the very pieces in this chest, was legally mine. The shares in our family business, shares that would have given me financial independence, were mine. And they had hidden it all. Footsteps on the attic stairs startled me from my shock. I quickly took photos of the will with my phone before closing the chest, my heart pounding. Susan appeared in the doorway, her eyes immediately darting to the chest in my hands. "What are you doing?" "I found this," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "It has Grandpa's will inside. The one you told me left everything to you and Dad." She didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. "Oh, you weren't supposed to find that," she said casually, as if she'd simply misplaced a cookbook. "We were going to give those to Gabby for her wedding. The shares, well, you've always been so independent, Bree. We didn't think you needed them like Gabby does. She has a certain lifestyle to maintain. Like that was supposed to be a compliment. Like that was supposed to erase the years of quiet theft. These were left to me, I said, my voice shaking now. Explicitly to me. Not to you, not to be redistributed as you see fit. Don't be dramatic, Susan sighed, using the phrase she always deployed whenever I expressed any negative emotion. Family assets stay in the family. We're just making sure they're used appropriately. By giving my inheritance to Gabby? By putting them where they'll do the most good, she corrected, her tone suggesting I was being childish for even questioning this. Gabby has always had clear plans, a trajectory. You've always been drifting. I wanted to argue, to explain that my drifting was a direct result of having opportunities systematically stripped away from me, of never receiving the same support and encouragement Gabby did. But I knew it would fall on deaf ears. In Susan's version of reality, Gabby's success was due to her innate superiority, and my struggles were character flaws rather than the product of their unequal parenting. I'd like the jewelry back, I said, finally. It's legally mine. Susan laughed, that airy, dismissive laugh that always made me feel 2 inches tall. Oh, Bree, let's not make an issue where there isn't one. These things are valuable family pieces. They need to stay with someone who appreciates their significance. Like Gabby? I asked, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Yes, like Gabby. No pretense now, just raw honesty. She knows how to honor traditions, how to represent the family name. I remember standing there, gripping the will so tightly my hands shook, a lifetime of doubt suddenly confirmed in ink. I knew then that I would never win this battle, not on their turf, not by their rules. Not yet. So I placed the chest back where I'd found it, keeping my knowledge, and the photos I'd taken, to myself. I bided my time, consulting quietly with a lawyer friend who confirmed what I already knew. The will was legally binding, and the inheritance was rightfully mine. That was the moment I knew I had always been alone in this family. Sitting in the library of the Grand Pavilion, that memory burned fresh in my mind. Today, Gabby would be wearing that pearl necklace, my necklace, as her something old. Susan had mentioned it just last week, so proud of the family tradition they were continuing. My phone buzzed again. Bree, where are you? Speeches are starting soon. I stood up, smoothing my dress. The decision crystallized in my mind with sudden, perfect clarity. I wasn't going to their reception. I wasn't taking my seat in the hallway. I was going to take something else entirely. I slipped out of the library and made my way through the venue's corridors, keeping to the periphery where guests were unlikely to spot me. My mind was racing, calculating risks and possibilities. I had no concrete plan yet, only a certainty that I would no longer accept the role they had cast me in. As I rounded a corner, I nearly collided with Austin. He was alone, leaning against the wall, his bow tie slightly askew, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked up, startled. Then recognition dawned in his eyes. Bree, he said, straightening. I was just... He gestured vaguely at nothing in particular. Hiding? I supplied, a hint of unexpected amusement in my voice. A rueful smile crossed his face. Is it that obvious? I studied him for a moment. Austin Henderson, heir to Henderson Tech, golden boy with the perfect pedigree, now technically my brother-in-law, looked distinctly uncomfortable in his own wedding reception. Not to most people, I said finally, but I recognized the signs of someone who needs a breather from the Winters family circus. He laughed, a genuine sound that surprised me. In our limited interactions over the past year, Austin had always seemed reserved, perhaps even a bit formal. I'd attributed it to natural caution around his future in-laws, but now I wondered if there was more to it. Your seat assignment, he said abruptly, his expression sobering. I just found out. That wasn't... I didn't know about that. I tensed. It's fine. It's not fine. He took a sip of his whiskey, his eyes meeting mine directly. Gabby told me you couldn't make it to the reception at all. When I saw your name on the hallway table list, I asked her about it, and she said it was a last-minute change because you preferred to be near the exit for an early departure. The lie was so perfectly Gabby, plausible enough to avoid scrutiny, designed to make me seem like the one who didn't care about family, while making herself look accommodating of my supposed preferences. That sounds like Gabby, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Austin studied me for a moment longer. You know, for sisters, you two are remarkably different. We're not actually sisters, I said without thinking, then immediately wanted to take it back. This was his wedding day, not the time to unload family secrets. But Austin didn't look shocked. If anything, his expression shifted to one of curiosity. Stepsisters? I hesitated, then decided there was little point in hiding it now. Half-sisters. Technically, same mother, different fathers. Oh. He took another sip of his whiskey. Gabby never mentioned that. Gabby doesn't know. Now he did look surprised. What? How is that possible? I sighed, leaning against the wall opposite him. It's complicated. Susan, my mother, had an affair before she married Thomas. I was the result. Thomas accepted me as his own, legally adopted me, but it's always been different. Austin finished quietly. Yes. A silence fell between us, not uncomfortable but laden with unspoken understanding. Austin swirled the amber liquid in his glass, seemingly lost in thought. Can I ask you something? He said finally, his voice lower, more hesitant. That depends, I replied, echoing Renee's earlier words to me. Is this a polite wedding conversation, or is this something else? He didn't smile, didn't even pretend. Something inside me shifted. Austin sighed, rubbing his temple like he was already regretting this. Does your sister ever talk about me differently when I'm not around? There it was. That single question. That moment where reality peeked through. The cracks of whatever illusion Gabby had been feeding him. For a split second, I considered lying. Maybe out of some misplaced sense of protection. Maybe because exposing the truth in a setting like this was a dangerous thing. But then I remembered my seat assignment. I remembered Gabby's smirk. I remembered my mother's dismissal. And I remembered the stolen inheritance. I glanced at his whiskey glass. You should probably finish that first. Austin tensed, then lifted, the glass to his lips and downed the remaining liquid in one swallow. Austin, I said carefully, I don't think you know Gabby as well as you think you do. His jaw tightened. I was afraid of that. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. She's been acting different since the engagement, he finally said, his voice quieter now, edged with something close to frustration. Controlling. There are things she doesn't want me to see, people she doesn't want me to talk to. My stomach twisted, because of course there were. Like you, he added, his gaze direct. She's been remarkably insistent that we shouldn't spend much time together. Said you were difficult and always trying to steal her spotlight. I nearly laughed at the irony. And you believed her? I didn't know what to believe. I barely know you. He shrugged. But my mother kept saying I should make my own judgments. And now this seating thing. He trailed off, then straightened suddenly, as if coming to a decision. I think there's something you should see. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone, tapping through to what appeared to be screenshots of text messages. He handed it to me hesitantly. These were sent to my mother anonymously last week. She showed them to me this morning, asked if I was sure about the wedding. I thought they might be fake. Or taken out of context. I scrolled through the messages, my heart sinking with each swipe. There were dozens of texts from Gabby to her friends, to the wedding planner, to people who had no business, knowing what was in her heart. Because what was in her heart was cold and calculating. The messages were brutal, petty, cruel. Gabby trashing Renee, calling her controlling, materialistic. A rich old woman who just needed to write the checks and stay out of her life. Gabby talking about Austin, how she was training him to be the husband she needed, how he'd do whatever she wanted because he was so desperate to prove he wasn't just living off his family's money. And then the worst one, Gabby laughing about how easy this marriage would be because Austin's family had the connections she needed for her social climbing, and all she had to do was play her part until she didn't have to anymore. I looked up from the phone, finding Austin watching me intently. "Are they real?" he asked quietly. I hesitated, but only for a second. "Yes. This is how she talks when you're not around." He closed his eyes briefly, a muscle working in his jaw. "My mother has been trying to tell me, in her way, asking questions, suggesting I take more time. I thought she was just being overprotective. Your mother," I said slowly, "seems like a very perceptive woman." Austin nodded, taking his phone back and slipping it into his pocket. "She is." He straightened his shoulders, his expression shifting, from hurt to something more resolved. "I need to talk to Gabby." "Now? In the middle of your reception? Is there a better time to confront the person you just married about their fundamental dishonesty?" His tone was bitter, but there was a flash of dry humor in his eyes. Despite everything, I found myself admiring his directness. No denial, no desperate attempts to explain away what he'd seen. Just a clear-eyed recognition of the truth, uncomfortable as it was. "What will you do?" I asked. He shook his head slightly. "I'm not sure yet, but I'm not going to pretend I didn't see those messages." He hesitated, then added, "And I'm not going to let them keep treating you like this." The unexpected alliance caught me off guard. I'd spent so long being the odd one out in my family that having someone, especially someone who had just married, into the winter's fold, take my side felt almost disorienting. "You don't have to do that," I said. "This is between me and them." "Maybe," he conceded, "but now I'm involved too." He straightened his tie with a determined gesture. "I think it's time we both stopped accepting the roles they've assigned us. He turned to go. He paused. "Whatever you're planning, and I can see in your eyes that you're planning something, be careful. Gabby doesn't lose gracefully." I watched him walk away, his words echoing in my mind. He was right about one thing. I was planning something. And now, unexpectedly, I had an ally. I pulled my phone from my purse and dialed a number I knew by heart. "Liam," I said when my lawyer friend answered, "It's time. Bring the documents we prepared." While I waited for Liam to arrive, I made my way to the coat check. I needed a quiet place to think, to plan my next move. The attendant, a young woman with a kind smile, looked surprised when I asked to see my own coat. "The reception's just getting started," she said, already reaching for my claim ticket. "I know," I replied, matching her smile with one of my own. "I just need to grab something from my pocket." She nodded, disappearing into the rows of garments before returning with my navy wool coat. I thanked her and stepped into a nearby alcove, my fingers immediately seeking the inside pocket. There they were, copies of the photos I'd taken of Grandpa's will, printed and notarized 2 weeks ago, along with a legal demand letter Liam had helped me draft. I had been planning to send these documents after the wedding. I didn't want to ruin Gabby's big day. Despite everything, some part of me still clung to the hope that family meant something. But that was before the hallway seat, before the smirk, before the full realization that to them, I would always be an afterthought. My phone buzzed with a text from Liam. "Parking now. Meet me at the north entrance in 5. Perfect timing. I returned my coat to the attendant and made my way through the venue, careful to avoid the ballroom where speeches would be underway. As I crossed through the grand foyer, I caught a glimpse of the reception through the open. Doors, crystal chandeliers casting a warm glow over elegant table settings, guests in their finery laughing and drinking champagne. At the center of it all, Gabby and Austin at the head table, though even from this distance I could see the tension in his posture. And there, gleaming at Gabby's throat, was my grandmother's pearl necklace. The sight of it, my rightful inheritance, draped around her neck like it belonged there, sent a fresh wave of resolve through me. I reached the north entrance just as Liam was coming up the steps. He looked sharp in his dark suit, a leather portfolio tucked under his arm. We'd met in law school before I dropped out to pursue photography, another choice my family had deemed impractical and disappointing. "You sure about this?" he asked. Without preamble, his eyes searching mine for any hesitation. "Never been more sure of anything," I replied. He nodded, his expression serious. "I brought everything. The court filing is ready to go first thing Monday morning, but serving them today." He hesitated. "That's going to cause a scene." "I'm counting on it," I said quietly. Liam raised an eyebrow but didn't question me further. That was one of the things I'd always appreciated about him. He respected my decisions, even when he didn't fully understand them. "So what's the plan?" he asked, opening his portfolio to reveal neatly organized documents. "We have the inheritance claim, the cease and desist regarding the family heirlooms, and the demand for a full accounting of your grandfather's estate." I glanced around, making sure no one was within earshot. "I need to confront them privately. First, I want to give them one chance to do the right thing." My voice hardened slightly. "But I need leverage." Liam nodded, understanding immediately. He extracted 3 sealed envelopes from his portfolio. "These are formal notices of your intent to file suit, addressed to your parents and sister. Once these are delivered, they're officially served." "Perfect," I said, taking the envelopes. They felt heavy in my hand, weighty with the potential consequences they contained. "Wait here. I'll text you if I need backup." As I turned to go, Liam caught my arm gently. "Bree," he said quietly, "whatever happens in there, remember you have every legal right to what was left to you. Don't let them twist this into you being the villain." I squeezed his hand in gratitude. "Don't worry. I'm done letting them define me." With renewed determination, I made my way toward the private lounge where families typically gathered during wedding receptions. As expected, Susan and Thomas were there, along with a few close relatives, taking a brief respite from the celebration. My mother spotted me first, her expression shifting quickly from surprise to irritation. "Bree, where have you been? You missed the toasts and—" She paused, noticing the envelopes in my hand. "What are those?" "We need to talk," I said, my voice calmer than I expected. "Privately." Susan glanced around at the curious relatives, then nodded stiffly. "Thomas," she called to my father, who was engaged in conversation with an elderly uncle. "Bree needs to speak with us." The 3 of us moved to a quiet corner of the lounge. I could hear the reception in full swing through the doors. Music, laughter, the sounds of celebration continuing without us. It felt symbolic somehow. "What's this about?" Thomas asked, his expression guarded. "If it's about the seating arrangement, I already told you." "It's not about the seating," I interrupted, surprising myself with my boldness. "Well, not directly. It's about this." I pulled out the photos of the will, laying them on a side table where both could see. Grandpa's will, the one that specifically leaves his jewelry collection and 20% of Winter's holdings to me. The color drained from Susan's face. Thomas looked genuinely confused for a moment, then comprehension dawned in his eyes. "Where did you get this?" Susan demanded, her voice tight. "From the chest you hid in the attic. The one containing the jewelry Gabby is wearing right now." I kept my voice level, factual. "I found it 2 years ago, took photos, and consulted a lawyer. Everything in that chest belongs to me. Legally. Irrefutably. Thomas glanced at Susan, his expression darkening. You told me Harold's will left everything to us jointly. Susan's composure slipped for a fraction of a second before she recovered. It doesn't matter. We're family. What's ours is Gabby's and Bree's eventually anyway. Except it's not working that way, is it? I challenged. You've given my inheritance, my legal inheritance, to Gabby. You've hidden the truth about the company's shares that should have been transferred to me on my 25th birthday. You've lied, manipulated, and stolen from me. That's absurd, Susan scoffed, but her voice lacked conviction. We were protecting those assets until you showed some responsibility, some commitment to the family legacy. You mean until I became more like Gabby, I countered. That was never going to happen, and you know it. Not because I couldn't, but because you never wanted it to. You needed me to be the disappointment to make Gabby shine brighter. Thomas looked genuinely troubled now, his gaze moving between the will photos and Susan. Susan, did you know about this specific bequest to Bree? My mother's hesitation was answer enough. I'm not here to negotiate, I said, cutting through the tension. I'm here to inform you that I'm claiming what's rightfully mine. Today. I handed them each one of the sealed envelopes. These are formal legal notices of my intent to file suit for recovery of inherited assets, an accounting of all dividends and interest accrued since my 25th birthday, and immediate return of all jewelry items listed in the will. Susan stared at the envelope as if it might bite her. You can't be serious. At your sister's wedding? My half-sister, I corrected quietly, watching realization dawn in Thomas's eyes. Yes, I know about that too. Susan's hand flew to her throat, her perfectly manicured nails digging into her skin. How dare you? No! I interrupted, my voice steady but firm. How dare you? How dare you steal from me? Lie to me. Treat me like I'm somehow less deserving of family legacy because I'm not Thomas's biological daughter. Thomas flinched at the words spoken aloud, his gaze dropping to the floor. You have a choice, I continued. Return what's mine quietly now, or I serve Gabby with her notice too, in the middle of her reception, in front of all those society friends you care so much about. Susan's eyes narrowed. You wouldn't. Try me, I answered, meeting her gaze. Without flinching. I'm done being the family doormat. I'm done accepting scraps while Gabby gets everything. I'm done pretending we're a loving family when clearly I've never been considered an equal member. For the first time in my life, I saw uncertainty in my mother's eyes. She'd always been so confident in her control, so certain of her ability to manage everyone and everything around her. Now, faced with the prospect of public exposure and legal consequences, that confidence was crumbling. What exactly do you want? Thomas asked, his voice heavy with resignation. Everything that was left to me, I said simply. The jewelry, the shares, and an acknowledgement, in writing, that you wrongfully withheld my inheritance. I pulled out my phone, showing them the screen where Liam's number was ready to dial. I have my lawyer waiting outside. We can draft the acknowledgement right now. Susan looked like she might argue further, but Thomas placed a restraining hand on her arm. Let's be reasonable, he said quietly. If what Bree says is true, and based on these photos it appears to be, then we need to make this right. I hadn't expected Thomas to fold so quickly. For a moment, I felt a flicker of something like respect for my adoptive father. That flicker died with his next words. We can transfer the shares after the wedding, he said. As for the jewelry, well, Gabby is wearing it now. We can't exactly demand she take it off in the middle of her reception. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Actually, that's exactly what I intend to do. Susan's eyes widened. You can't be serious. You would ruin her wedding day over some old jewelry? You mean my jewelry? I corrected, my voice steady. The heirlooms that were specifically left to me, that you took without my knowledge or consent, And that you're now allowing Gabby to parade around in as if they belong to her? Thomas stepped between us, always the peacemaker. Bree, please. Let's handle this like adults. We can arrange for the jewelry to be returned tomorrow. The way you arranged for me to be seated in the hallway today? I interrupted, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. The way you've arranged for me to be an afterthought my entire life? No, I'm done with your arrangements. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked toward the ballroom, the third envelope still in my hand. Behind me, I could hear Susan's heels clicking rapidly across the floor as she hurried to catch up. "Bree, stop this right now," she hissed, grabbing my arm just as I reached the ballroom doors. "You're making a scene." I pulled free from her grasp. "I haven't even started." The reception was in full swing, the dance floor crowded with guests moving to the music. Gabby and Austin were at their table, not speaking to each other, a noticeable gap between them despite the intimate setting. The pearls gleamed around, Gabby's neck catching the light with every movement. I made my way toward them, aware of Susan and Thomas following close behind. Guests turned to look as we passed, sensing the tension that radiated from us like heat from a fire. When I reached the head table, Gabby looked up with irritation. "Where have you been? Dad was looking for you for the father-daughter dance and—" She paused, taking in my expression, the envelope in my hand, and our parents' distressed faces behind me. "What's going on?" "I'd like to speak with you," I said, surprised by the calmness in my voice. "Privately." Gabby glanced around at the curious guests, then back at me. "Can't it wait? We're in the middle of—" "No, it can't wait," I interrupted. "But if you prefer, we can have this conversation right here." Austin, who had been watching silently, stood up. "Let's use the bridal suite," he suggested, his voice neutral but his eyes understanding as they met mine. "It's empty now." Gabby looked like she wanted to argue, but apparently thought better of it. With a tight smile to the guests nearest her table, she stood and followed Austin toward a door at the side of the ballroom. I trailed after them, Susan and Thomas just behind. Once inside the luxurious bridal suite, Gabby rounded on me. "What is the meaning of this?" "It's my wedding day, Bree. Whatever petty grievance you have can surely wait." "The necklace you're wearing," I said, cutting through her tirade. "It's mine." Gabby's hand went instinctively to the pearls at her throat. "What are you talking about?" "These are family heirlooms. Mom gave them to me for the wedding. They're not hers to give." I handed Gabby the envelope. "This is a formal legal notice. Grandpa's will left his entire jewelry collection specifically to me. The pearls, the sapphire ring, the locket, all of it. Mom and Dad have been hiding them from me for years." Gabby looked from the envelope to our parents, confusion and disbelief warring on her face. "Is this true?" Susan stepped forward. "Gabby, darling, it's complicated. Your grandfather had some outdated ideas about inheritance. We were simply ensuring that family treasures remained available for important occasions like your wedding. By stealing them from me," I added, my voice harder now. "Let's be clear about what happened. They deliberately concealed Grandpa's will, kept the jewelry hidden in the attic, and lied to me for years about my inheritance." Austin, who had been silent until now, turned to look at Susan and Thomas with new understanding in his eyes. "So the seating arrangement today, that wasn't an accident, was it? You've been systematically sidelining Bree." Thomas at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. Susan, as always, maintained her composure. "Austin, this is a family matter. I'm sure once everyone calms down—" "I've been calm for 28 years, I interrupted. "I've accepted being the family afterthought, the inconvenient reminder of your past, Mom. I've smiled and nodded and played my part. But I'm done now." I turned to face Gabby directly. "I want my necklace back. And my ring. And everything else? That belongs to me." Gabby's expression hardened, her fingers still clutching the pearls. "You're doing this now? At my wedding reception? This is so typically you, Bree. Always having to make everything about yourself." I nearly laughed at the irony. That's rich coming from you, the golden child who's never had to fight for anything in her life. Who's had everything handed to her, including things that legally belong to me. "I didn't know," Gabby snapped, her carefully controlled facade cracking. "How was I supposed to know Mom gave me jewelry that was meant for you?" For a moment, I almost believed her. But then I saw it. That familiar flicker in her eyes, the slight curl of her lip. She was lying. She'd always known. Or at least she'd suspected and chose not to question it. "Take them off," I said quietly. "Now." Gabby's hand tightened around the pearls. "No, Gabby," Austin said, his voice gentle but firm. "Give her the necklace." She turned to him, betrayal flashing across her face. "You're taking her side?" "I'm not taking sides," he replied, though his expression suggested otherwise. "But if what Bree says is true, if these legally belong to her, then keeping them would be wrong." Gabby looked from Austin to me, then to our parents, as if expecting them to intervene, to fix this situation as they'd fixed everything else in her life. But Susan and Thomas remained silent, the weight of their deception finally catching up to them. With trembling fingers, Gabby unclasped the pearl necklace, holding it out to me with a coldness I recognized all too well. "Fine, take it. It's just jewelry." "And the ring," I said, nodding to the sapphire glinting on her right hand. "And the locket in your purse." Her eyes widened slightly. She hadn't expected me to know about the locket. Without a word, she slipped the ring from her finger and retrieved the locket from her clutch, dropping them unceremoniously into my outstretched hand. The weight of these small treasures in my palm felt significant, not just for their monetary value, but for what they represented. A small victory. A reclaiming of what was rightfully mine. "Is that all?" Gabby asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Or would you like to strip me bare in front of my new husband?" I met her gaze steadily. "That's not all. There's also the matter of my 20% stake in Winters Holdings, the shares Grandpa left me that Mom and Dad have been keeping from me." At this, Thomas finally spoke up. "We can discuss the business matters later, Bree. This isn't the time or place." "You've been saying that for years," I cut in. "There's never a right time for me to claim what's mine, is there? Always later. Always after Gabby's needs have been met." Austin looked between us, realization dawning in his eyes. "The company shares, that's why you were so insistent about merging Henderson Tech with Winters, wasn't it?" he asked Gabby. "It had nothing to do with synergy or market expansion. You were trying to dilute Bree's potential ownership before she discovered it." Gabby's silence was confirmation enough. I turned to my parents, fury and resolve hardening. My voice. "I want a written acknowledgement of my inheritance, signed today. And I want access to all company accounts and records first thing Monday morning." Susan shook her head, a tight smile on her lips. "You don't know the first thing about running a business, Bree. You're a photographer who couldn't even finish law school. What would you do with voting shares in a company like Winters Holdings?" "That's not your decision to make," I replied evenly. "Grandpa thought I was capable. That's all that matters." Thomas sighed heavily, resignation in his posture. "We'll draft something today, a formal acknowledgement. But the company transition will take time. There are legal procedures, board notifications." "I'm aware," I interrupted. "Liam has already prepared the necessary documents." I glanced at my watch. "He's waiting outside. Shall I call him in? Or would you prefer to continue this conversation more publicly?" The threat hung in the air between us. Susan's eyes narrowed, but she nodded stiffly. "Fine. Have your lawyer draft whatever you need. We'll sign it." I felt no triumph, no joy in their capitulation, Only a cold certainty that I was doing what should have been done years ago. We should return to the reception, Gabby said suddenly, her social mask sliding back into place. People will be wondering where we've gone. By all means, I replied, carefully placing my reclaimed jewelry in my purse. Don't let me keep you from your special day. As Gabby moved toward the door, Austin hanging back slightly, I added, Oh, and Gabby? You might want to check your phone. I think you'll find some interesting messages there. Her steps faltered, confusion flickering across her face before she disappeared through the door, Austin following with one last glance in my direction. A look I couldn't quite decipher. I turned back to my parents, who stood watching me as if seeing me for the first time. Perhaps they were. I'll get Liam, I said, moving past them toward the exit. We have paperwork to sign. I found Liam waiting patiently by the north entrance, exactly where I'd left him. His eyebrows raised slightly when he saw me approach, a question in his expression. They're ready to sign, I said, surprising even myself with the steady confidence in my voice. And I already have the jewelry. He straightened, tucking his portfolio under his arm. All of it? Without a fight? Well, not exactly without a fight, I admitted, leading him back toward the private lounge. But Austin intervened, surprisingly. He took my side. Liam followed, his footsteps matching mine. Austin? Gabby's husband? That's unexpected. Trust me, I'm as surprised as you are. I glanced at him. But he seems to be having some revelations of his own about the Winters family today. We found my parents waiting in the lounge, sitting stiffly on opposite ends of a leather couch. The tension between them was palpable, perhaps the first real crack I'd ever witnessed in their unified front. Susan's perfectly manicured nails tapped an impatient rhythm on her clutch, while Thomas stared blankly at the wall, looking older than I'd ever seen him. This is Liam Garrett, my attorney, I said, closing the door behind us. Susan's eyes narrowed slightly. Your attorney? Since when do you have an attorney, Bree? Since I found out about the will 2 years ago, I replied evenly. Did you think I'd just let it go? She didn't answer, but her expression hardened. Liam stepped forward, the consummate professional setting his portfolio on the coffee table. Mr. and Mrs. Winters, I've prepared a formal acknowledgement of Ms. Winters' inheritance rights, as established in Harold Winters' will dated June 12, 2015. He extracted a document, sliding it across the table. It confirms her ownership of the family jewelry collection and her 20% stake in Winters Holdings, effective immediately. Thomas leaned forward, scanning the document with the careful eye of a businessman. There will need to be a formal transfer process for the shares, board notification, securities filings. Of course, Liam agreed smoothly. That's addressed in paragraph 3. All necessary procedures will be followed, but the acknowledgement of ownership is effective today. Susan hadn't moved to look at the document. And if we refuse to sign? Then, I file suit first thing Monday morning, I said simply. The will is clear. I have photographic evidence, and I'm prepared to depose every member of this family, including Gabby. On what grounds? Susan challenged, her voice cold. Liam answered before I could. Conversion of assets, fraudulent concealment, breach of fiduciary duty, to start. His tone remained professional but firm. Ms. Winters has an extremely strong case. The documentary evidence alone would likely be sufficient for summary judgment. Susan's mouth tightened into a thin line. I could almost see her calculating, weighing the risks of a protracted legal battle against the humiliation of conceding. Now, sign it, Susan, Thomas said suddenly, his voice weary. It's over. She turned to him, betrayal flashing across her face. Thomas, no. He shook his head firmly. We were wrong. You know it, I know it. Let's at least do the right thing now. He picked up the pen Liam had placed on the table and signed the document with a decisive stroke. After a moment of tense silence, Susan took the pen from him and added her signature, her movements stiff and controlled. "Thank you," Liam said, retrieving the document and tucking it safely into his portfolio. "I'll have copies sent to your offices on Monday, along with the formal notice to the board of directors." I expected to feel something more in this moment: triumph, vindication, maybe even relief. Instead, I felt oddly hollow, as if winning this battle had cost me something I couldn't yet identify. "Is that all?" Susan asked, her voice devoid of emotion. "For now," I replied. "But I expect full cooperation with the transfer process. No delays, no misplaced paperwork, no convenient oversights." Thomas nodded, not meeting my eyes. "You'll have it." As we prepared to leave, a commotion outside the lounge caught our attention. Raised voices, a crash of something breaking, and then the unmistakable sound of Gabby, her voice higher and sharper than I'd ever heard it. "You had no right! No right!" I exchanged a glance with Liam before moving quickly toward the door, pulling it open to reveal a scene of chaos in the adjacent hallway. Gabby stood facing Austin, her carefully constructed poise completely shattered. A broken champagne flute lay at her feet, liquid seeping into the plush carpet. Austin stood a few feet away, his expression a mixture of disgust and disappointment, his phone in his hand. "How could you?" Gabby demanded, her voice cracking. "Going through my private messages, showing them to everyone?" Austin's response was measured, unnervingly calm. "I didn't go through anything, Gabby. Someone sent them to my mother. Anonymous text from a number I don't recognize." He held up his phone. "Screenshots of your conversations. About me. About my family. About how this marriage was just a stepping." "Stone for you." Susan pushed past me, moving to Gabby's side. "What's going on? What messages?" Austin turned the phone toward her, his expression hardening. "See for yourself. Your daughter's true feelings about this marriage, about my family, about how easy it would be to get what she wants from us." Susan's face paled as she scrolled. Through the phone, her practiced composure finally cracking. "Gabby, tell me you didn't write these things. They're taken out of context," Gabby protested, her voice rising. "It was just venting, just girl talk. You know how it is." "Girl talk?" Austin repeated incredulously. "You called my mother a dried-up old bitch who needs to write the checks and stay out of your way. You said I was easy to manipulate because I'm desperate to prove I'm not just living off Daddy's money. You told your friends our marriage was a business transaction, for God's sake." Guests had begun to gather at the end of the hallway, drawn by the commotion. Renee Henderson appeared, her expression unreadable as she took in the scene. "Who sent these?" Gabby demanded, turning to face me with sudden fury. "It was you, wasn't it? You couldn't stand that today was about me, could you? You had to ruin it." I shook my head slowly. "I didn't send anything, Gabby. I didn't have to. Your own words did this." "Liar," she spat, taking a step toward me before Thomas caught her arm. "Enough, Gabriella," he said firmly, his voice cutting through her rage. "This isn't helping anything." Renee moved forward, her gaze moving from Gabby to Austin, then to me. "I received those messages from an anonymous sender as well," she said, her voice calm but edged with steel. "I wanted Austin to see who he was. Really marrying you," Gabby breathed, her anger finding a new target. "You've never wanted this marriage. You've been trying to sabotage us from the beginning." "I've been trying to protect my son," Renee corrected, unflinching. "And it seems I was right to be concerned." Austin stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "I can't do this," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "I can't start a marriage built on this kind of deception." "Austin," Gabby pleaded, her tone shifting instantly from rage to desperation. "Baby, please. We can talk about this. You know I love you." "Do I?" He shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping him. "I don't think I know anything about you anymore, Gabby, except that you're not the person I thought I was marrying." He turned, moving past the gathered guests with purposeful strides. Gabby started to follow, but Renee stepped into her path. "I think you've done enough damage for one day," she said quietly. Gabby's face contorted with fury. "This isn't over." "Actually," Austin called back over his shoulder, "it is. I'll be contacting my lawyer in the morning to begin annulment proceedings." The word hung in the air, heavy and final. Annulment, as if the marriage had never happened at all. Gabby stood frozen, the color draining from her face as the reality of what was happening finally seemed to hit her. In the span of 20 minutes, she had lost the pearls, the husband, the perfect society wedding she had spent a year planning. I felt a strange mix of emotions watching her. Pity, certainly, but also an undeniable sense of justice being served. For once, Gabby wasn't getting everything she wanted. For once, she was experiencing consequences. Susan turned to me, her eyes blazing with cold fury. "I hope you're satisfied, Bree. Is this what you wanted? To destroy your sister's wedding?" "I didn't do this," I replied calmly. "I didn't send those messages, but I won't pretend to be sorry that the truth came out." I looked past her to Gabby, who stood trembling with shock and rage. "Maybe now she'll understand how it feels to lose something you care about." Liam touched my arm gently. "Bree, we should go. We've done what we came to do." He was right. The documents were signed. The jewelry was in my purse. There was nothing more to be gained by staying in this toxic atmosphere. "I'm leaving," I said, addressing no one in particular. "Goodbye." As we turned to go, I caught a glimpse of Thomas watching me, an unreadable expression on his face. Something almost like regret or perhaps respect. But I didn't stop to analyze it. I'd spent too many years trying to decipher the cryptic emotions of my family, always searching for approval that never came. It was time to walk away. As Liam and I walked through the grand foyer, heading for the exit, I felt a strange lightness in my chest. For nearly 3 decades, I had carried the weight of being the family disappointment, the unwanted daughter, the perpetual afterthought. Now, with the truth exposed and my inheritance reclaimed, I could finally set that burden down. We were almost at the door when a voice called out behind us. "Bree, wait." I turned to see Thomas hurrying toward us, his face flushed with exertion. Liam tensed beside me, shifting slightly as if to place himself between me and my father. "It's okay," I murmured to him, before facing Thomas. "What is it?" Thomas glanced at Liam, then back to me. "Can we speak privately, just for a moment?" I hesitated, then nodded to Liam. "I'll meet you at the car." Liam looked unconvinced but respected my decision. "I'll be right outside if you need me," he said, giving Thomas a pointed look before stepping through the grand entrance doors. Thomas led me to a small alcove off the main foyer, where a pair of upholstered benches faced each other under a stained glass window. The late afternoon sun filtered through the colored glass, casting rainbow patterns across the marble floor. He sat heavily on one bench, gesturing for me to take the other. "I owe you an explanation," he said, his voice low and strained. "And an apology." I remained standing. "You signed the documents. That's all I needed from you." He shook his head slowly. "No, it's not. There's something else you should know." He took a deep breath, seeming to gather his courage. "Something about your grandfather's will, about why Susan was so determined to keep it from you." Despite myself, I felt curiosity stir. "I'm listening." "The jewelry, the 20% stake in the company, those weren't the only things Harold left you." Thomas looked up at me, his eyes tired but clear. "He also left you controlling interest in the Winters family trust." I stared at him, trying to process this information. "The trust? But that controls everything," Thomas finished quietly. "The real estate holdings, the art collection, the offshore accounts. The trust is the majority shareholder in Winters Holdings. Whoever controls the trust controls the entire family fortune. My legs suddenly felt weak, and I sank onto the bench, opposite him. That's impossible. Grandpa would never. He did. Thomas reached into his inner jacket pocket and withdrew a folded document. This is the full copy of Harold's will, the one Susan kept from you, the one she made me promise never to mention. He held it out to me. Harold always had a soft spot. For you, Bree. He saw something in you, integrity perhaps, that he felt was lacking in the rest of us. With trembling fingers, I took the document, unfolding it carefully. There it was, in black and white. To my granddaughter, Brianna, I leave my voting interest and controlling position in the Winters Family Trust, effective on her 25th birthday or upon my death, whichever comes later. I looked up at Thomas, stunned. You've known about this all along? You let them hide this from me? He had the grace to look ashamed. I did. It's no excuse, but Susan, she was terrified of losing control. She convinced me it would be best for the family if we maintained the status quo. He sighed heavily. I've spent my entire marriage deferring to her judgment, letting her make the decisions, staying in the background. It was easier that way. Comfortable. Comfortable for whom? I asked, my voice hardening. Not for me. Never for me. I know, he admitted. I've failed you, Bree. Failed you as a father. Failed you as a trustee. He gestured to the will in my hands. But I'm trying to make it right now. That's the original. There are no other copies. Susan made sure of that. But with this, you can claim everything that's rightfully yours. I studied him, trying to understand his sudden change of heart. Why now? After all these years, why are you giving me this today? Thomas was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. When Harold was dying, he made me promise to look after you, to make sure you received your inheritance. I gave him my word. His voice grew softer. I've broken that promise for 6 years. Watching you today, your courage, your dignity even, in the face of Gabby's hallway seating and all the ways we've marginalized you, it finally gave me the courage to honor my promise to your grandfather. I looked down at the will again, still trying to absorb the magnitude of what it meant. Controlling interest in the trust, the power to decide the direction of Winters Holdings, the ability to access accounts I hadn't even known existed, does. Susan know you're giving this to me? I asked. A hint of a smile crossed Thomas's face. No, and she won't be pleased when she finds out. That's an understatement, I murmured, carefully folding the document and tucking it into my purse alongside the jewelry. Thank you, I added after a moment, for finally doing the right thing. Thomas nodded, his expression solemn. There's something else you should know, Bree. He hesitated, then continued. About your biological father. I stiffened. This was a topic that had been strictly forbidden throughout my childhood. Whenever I'd asked questions about my real father, Susan had shut them down immediately, and Thomas had always deferred to her wishes. He's been trying to contact you, Thomas said quietly. For years. Susan intercepted his letters, his calls. She was determined to keep him out of your life. Why? I asked, a forgotten ache awakening in my chest. Why would she do that? Because Vincent Gregory wasn't just anyone. He was Harold's protege, his chosen successor before Susan married me. Thomas's voice held a note of old bitterness. Your grandfather wanted Vincent to run the company, but when Susan became pregnant with you, and Vincent was committed to marrying someone else, well, Harold arranged a suitable alternative. I stared at him, realization dawning. You. Thomas nodded, a rueful smile on his lips. Me. A sensible match with the right background and education. I would take Vincent's place at the company, adopt his child as my own, and give Susan the respectability she needed. A business arrangement, I said slowly. At first, yes. Thomas's expression softened. But I did grow to love her in my way. And you... He stopped, emotion finally breaking through his controlled facade. You were never part of the arrangement. Bree. From the moment I first held you, you were my daughter. Not by blood, but in every way that mattered. I didn't know what to say. All these years I'd felt Thomas's emotional distance, interpreted it as indifference or disappointment. I'd never considered that his reserve might mask something deeper, a complicated mix of love and obligation, pride and regret. Vincent has been asking about you again, Thomas continued after a moment. He's back in Chicago after years abroad. When he heard about Gabby's wedding, he reached out to me directly. He retrieved a business card from his wallet, offering it to me. He'd like to meet you, if you're willing. Vincent Gregory. My biological father, a name I'd been forbidden to ask about, a part of my history that had been erased. And now, here was his contact information being handed to me as casually as if we were discussing a business referral. Does he know? I asked, taking the card. About the inheritance, about the trust. Thomas shook his head. No. Harold kept that information strictly between himself, Susan, and me. Vincent only knows that Harold always had a special affection for you, even from a distance. I slipped the card into my purse alongside the will, my mind reeling with all these revelations. My entire understanding of my family, my place in it, even my own identity, was shifting beneath my feet like sand. I should go, I said finally, rising from the bench. Liam is waiting. Thomas stood as well, uncertainty in his expression. What will you do now, Bree? With the will, with the trust? I considered the question for a moment. I don't know yet. I need time to think, to process all of this. I met his gaze directly. But whatever I decide, it will be my choice, not Susan's, not Gabby's, not even yours. He nodded, something like pride flickering in his eyes. You're more like Harold than any of us, he said quietly. He would be pleased to see you standing up for yourself today. As I turned to leave, Thomas called after me one last time. Bree? I paused, looking back at him. I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't respond, couldn't find the words to encapsulate all that hung between us. Years of silence and complicity, the weight of revealed secrets, the uncertain possibility of something new. Instead, I simply nodded before walking away, my steps carrying me toward the bright rectangle of daylight at the entrance, toward Liam waiting patiently by his car, toward a future suddenly, dizzyingly open with possibilities. I was no longer just leaving my sister's wedding, I was leaving with everything. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot as Liam and I walked to his car. He had been waiting patiently, leaning against the hood, his suit jacket unbuttoned in the warm spring air. One look at my face told him something significant had happened. You okay? He asked, straightening as I approached. I nodded, though, okay, wasn't exactly the right word for the whirlwind of emotions I was experiencing. I just learned that I own a lot more than some jewelry and 20% of the company. Liam's eyebrows shot up. How much more? Everything. I gestured for him to open the car. I'll explain on the way. Once we were seated in his sleek black sedan, I pulled out the document Thomas had given me and handed it to Liam. As he read, his expression shifted from curiosity to disbelief to something approaching awe. Controlling interest in the Winters family trust, he murmured, scanning the relevant paragraph. Bree, this changes everything. I know. I stared out the window at the Grand Pavilion, its stone facade glowing amber in the sunset. Light. Inside those walls, my sister's wedding reception was likely dissolving into chaos. Gabby's text messages exposed, her new marriage already crumbling, and now, unknown to her or Susan, the final blow. The family fortune slipping from their grasp. We need to secure this document immediately, Liam said, already shifting into lawyer mode. Get it notarized, file it with the court, notify the trustees. We will, I assured him. First thing Monday morning. Liam glanced at me, his brow furrowed. Why not now? We could go straight to my office, make copies, start the process immediately. I considered his question. The practical, cautious move would be to do exactly as he suggested, to secure my claim as quickly as possible before Susan or anyone else could interfere. Yet something held me back. I need some time, I said finally. Just a few hours to process all of this. Today has been a lot. Liam's expression softened with understanding. Of course. He started the car, the engine purring to life. Where to then? Your apartment? I shook my head. No, there's somewhere else I want to go first. 20 minutes later, we pulled up in front of a modest brick townhouse in Lincoln Park. My grandfather's home, the place where he'd lived for the last decade of his life after downsizing from the sprawling Winters estate in Lake Forest. The property had stood empty since his death, neither sold nor occupied, as if frozen in time awaiting its rightful owner. You still have the key? Liam asked as we approached the front door. I nodded, pulling a small brass key from my wallet where I'd kept it for 6 years, unable to part with this last connection to the one person in my family who had truly seen me. Grandpa gave it to me shortly before he died. Told me I was always welcome, even when he was gone. The lock turned smoothly, and we stepped into the hushed interior. The air was still but not stale. Someone had been maintaining the place, keeping it clean and aired. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating familiar furnishings draped in white cloths, like ghosts of a life once lived. I moved through the rooms slowly, memories surfacing with each step. Sunday afternoons playing chess in the study, summer evenings on the back porch, Grandpa teaching me to identify constellations, the Christmas when he'd given me my first professional camera, ignoring Susan's disapproval. He knew, I said softly, more to myself than to Liam. All this time he knew how they treated me. And he did something about it, Liam replied, standing respectfully in the doorway of the study while I circled the draped desk. He made sure you'd have the power to reclaim your place. I pulled the cloth off the desk, revealing the polished mahogany surface beneath. A thin layer of dust had settled despite the regular cleaning, but otherwise, it looked exactly as I remembered. The leather blotter, the crystal paperweight, the photograph of Grandpa and me at my college graduation, his face beaming with pride, while Susan and Thomas stood stiffly in the background. There's a safe, I said, moving behind the desk. Behind that painting. Liam helped me lift down the landscape oil painting, revealing a wall safe with a digital keypad. I hesitated only a moment before entering the combination. My birthday, followed by the year Grandpa founded Winters Holdings. The safe door swung, open silently. Inside were several leather-bound portfolio folders, each labeled in my grandfather's precise handwriting. Property deeds, stock certificates, banking information, personal documents. I carefully lifted out each portfolio, placing them on the desk. The last item in the safe was a sealed envelope with my name written across the front. He left you a letter, Liam observed. My hands trembled slightly as I broke the seal and unfolded the pages inside. My dearest Brianna, if you are reading this, then you have finally claimed what is rightfully yours. I had hoped to see this day, while I was still alive, to witness you stepping into your power and taking control of the legacy I built. But if fate has decreed otherwise, know that I am with you in spirit as you discover the truth I have kept for you. You may wonder why I chose to leave the trust in your hands rather than Susan's or Thomas's, or even young Gabriella's. The answer is simple. Because I see in you the qualities that matter most, not just intelligence or ambition, which your sister has in abundance, but integrity, compassion, and a sense of fairness that has been sorely lacking in our family for too long. Winters Holdings was built on innovation and determination, but somewhere along the way, your mother lost sight of what truly matters. She began to value appearance over substance, status over character. I watched with growing concern as she molded Gabriella in her image, and with deep sadness as she pushed you to the periphery of the family. I could have intervened more directly while I lived, but I knew such actions would only drive deeper wedges between you all. Instead, I chose to place my faith in you, to give you the tools you would need when the time was right. The trust is now yours to control as you see fit. The portfolios contain everything you will need to understand its workings, its holdings, and its potential. Use this power wisely, not for revenge, but for restoration of yourself, of the company's vision, and perhaps, if possible, of the family that has lost its way. Remember always that wealth is merely a tool, not an end in itself. It can build or destroy, unite or divide. I trust that in your hands it will be used to create rather than consume, to lift up rather than tear down. I am proud of you, Brianna. I have always been proud of you, and I have every confidence that you will surpass even my highest hopes for what you might become. With all my love, Harold. I read the letter twice, then passed it to Liam, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. As he read, I opened the portfolio labeled Banking Information, revealing detailed records of accounts I had never known existed. Trust accounts, investment portfolios, offshore holdings. The combined value was staggering, easily 10 times what I had imagined the Winters' fortune to be. Bree, Liam said softly, setting down the letter. This goes well beyond a simple inheritance dispute. This changes everything about your life. I know. I closed the portfolio, my mind racing with implications, and I have no idea what to do with it all. Liam glanced at his watch. It's getting late. We should secure these documents and get you home. You've had an overwhelming day. He was right. Exhaustion was beginning to set in, the emotional toll of confronting my family, reclaiming my inheritance, and now discovering the full magnitude of my grandfather's bequest finally catching up with me. We'll take everything to my office safe, Liam decided, already gathering the portfolios. First thing Monday, we'll begin the formal process of registering you as the controlling trustee. I nodded, carefully returning my grandfather's letter to its envelope. As I did, my phone began to vibrate in my purse. A call, then another, then a flurry of text notifications. I pulled it out to see multiple missed calls from Susan and Thomas, along with a series of increasingly frantic texts from my mother. Where are you? We need to talk immediately. Call me back this instant, Brianna. This is a family emergency. The last message had arrived seconds ago. We know about the trust. Thomas told me everything. We need to discuss this as a family before you. Do anything rash. I showed the phone to Liam, who frowned. That was fast. I'm guessing Thomas confessed as soon as he realized what he'd done. Or Susan figured it out when she saw my expression as I was leaving, I replied, silencing my phone and slipping it back into my purse. Either way, they know they've lost control. What do you want to do? Liam asked, watching me carefully. Looked around my grandfather's study one last time, drawing strength from the memories it held, from the confidence he had placed in me. Then I turned to Liam, my decision made. I want to disappear, I said simply. Just for a few days. No contact with any of them until I've had time to think, to plan my next move. Liam nodded. I know just the place. My family has a lake house in Michigan, completely private. No one would think to look for you there. Relief washed over me. That sounds perfect. As we gathered the documents and prepared to leave, I paused at the front door, looking back at my grandfather's home. A place that, I now realized, legally belonged to me through the trust. One more piece of my rightful inheritance, one more connection to the man who had believed in me when no one else did. "Thank you, Grandpa," I whispered into the quiet house. "I won't let you down." Then I locked the door behind us, stepping into the deepening twilight and whatever future awaited me, a future that, for the first time in my life, I had the power to shape completely on my own terms. Liam's family lake. House turned out to be a stunning cedar and glass structure, nestled among tall pines on the eastern shore of Lake Michigan. We arrived just as dusk was settling over the water, the last traces of daylight painting the horizon in strokes of pink and gold. "This is beautiful," I said, stepping out of the car and drawing in a deep breath of pine-scented air. After the stifling atmosphere of Gabby's wedding and the emotional whirlwind that followed, the peaceful lakeside setting felt like stepping into another world entirely. "My parents only use it in July and August," Liam explained, retrieving our bags from the trunk, my purse with its precious contents, and a small overnight bag he'd quickly packed at his apartment before leaving the city. "The rest of the year, it sits empty unless I come up for a weekend." The interior was just as impressive as the exterior. An open floor plan with soaring ceilings, wall-to-wall windows facing the lake, and a massive stone fireplace anchoring the living area. Modern but warm, luxurious without being ostentatious. The exact opposite of the Winters aesthetic, which had always favored ornate, traditional decor designed to broadcast old money and social position. "Make yourself at home," Liam said, setting my bag down by the staircase. "Guest room is upstairs, first door on the right. There's food in the fridge. I had the caretaker stock the basics last weekend when I thought I might come up." I nodded, suddenly aware of how exhausted I was. "Thank you for this, Liam. For everything today." He smiled. That gentle, understanding smile that had made me trust him from our first meeting in law school. "You're welcome, though I'm still just your lawyer, right? Not an accomplice in a grand heist?" The joke broke the tension I hadn't realized I was carrying. I laughed, the sound surprising me with its lightness. "Technically, I didn't steal anything. I just reclaimed what was already mine." "Exactly." Liam moved toward the kitchen. "I'll make us something to eat. You should rest. Take some time. Process everything." I wandered to the wall of windows overlooking the lake. The glass reflected my image back at me. Still in my burgundy dress from the wedding, my hair falling loose from its once careful styling, my eyes tired but somehow different, clearer, more certain. I pulled my phone from my purse, seeing another dozen missed calls and texts from Susan, along with new ones from Thomas and, surprisingly, Gabby. I switched it to airplane mode without reading any of them. Whatever crisis was unfolding back in Chicago would have to unfold without me, at least for tonight. Upstairs, I found the guest room Liam had mentioned, spacious and comfortable, with its own deck overlooking the water. I peeled off my dress, letting it fall to the floor in a puddle of burgundy silk, and stepped into the attached bathroom. The hot shower was heavenly, washing away the tension of the day, along with the last traces of wedding makeup. Wrapped in a plush robe I found hanging on the bathroom door, I returned to the bedroom to discover Liam had silently dropped off a t-shirt and sweatpants. His clothes, obviously, but clean and infinitely more comfortable than spending the evening in my wedding attire. I dressed quickly, then emptied the contents of my purse onto the bed. The pearl necklace, sapphire ring, and silver locket that had started this whole chain of events. The business card of Vincent Gregory, my biological father, and most importantly, the document that had changed everything, my grandfather's will naming me as the controlling trustee of the Winters family fortune. I sat cross-legged on the bed, holding each item in turn, trying to make sense of how dramatically my life had changed in the span of a single day. This morning, I had been Bree Winters, the family disappointment, relegated to a hallway seat at her sister's wedding. Now, I was Bree Winters, controller of a vast fortune, holder of the power my mother and sister had schemed so desperately to keep. What would I do with this power? The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. I had never wanted to run Winters Holdings. Photography had always been my passion, not corporate boardrooms and balance sheets. But now that the choice was mine, now that I held the keys to the kingdom, what would I choose? A gentle knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. "Dinner's ready if you're hungry," Liam called softly. I carefully returned my treasures to my purse before heading downstairs, following the delicious scent of garlic and herbs to the kitchen. Liam had prepared a simple pasta dish, which we eyed at the Granite Island bar, a bottle of red wine open between us. "Feeling any better?" he asked after we'd eaten in companionable silence for a few minutes. I twirled pasta around my fork, considering the question. Not better exactly. More recalibrated. Like I've been looking at my life through the wrong end of a telescope for years, and suddenly everything snapped into proper perspective. Liam nodded, understanding as always. That makes sense. It's a lot to process. Finding out you're not just entitled to some family heirlooms, but to control of the entire Winters empire. "It's not even about the money," I said, realizing the truth of it as I spoke. "It's about finally having confirmation that I wasn't crazy all these years, that there was a reason Susan favored Gabby, a reason they kept me at arm's length. They knew what Grandpa had done, knew that he had chosen me over them." "Harold Winters must have been quite a man," Liam observed, refilling our wine glasses. "To see past all the family dynamics, to recognize something in you that he valued enough to entrust with his legacy." I smiled, memories of my grandfather warming me more than the wine. He was brilliant businessman, but also kind, perceptive. He never made me feel like I was less than Gabby, even when everyone else did. I took a sip of wine, then added, "I wish he could have seen what happened today." "Maybe he orchestrated it," Liam suggested. "In his own way. Left you the inheritance knowing that someday when the time was right, you'd claim it and set things straight." The thought was comforting. The idea that perhaps today's events weren't just random chance, but the culmination of a plan set in motion years ago by the one person who had truly believed in me. After dinner, we moved to the deck, wrapped in soft blankets against the cool evening air. The lake stretched before us, a vast expanse of darkness broken only by the silver path of moonlight across the water. "What will you do now?" Liam asked eventually, his voice quiet against the backdrop of gentle waves lapping at the shore below. "I'm not sure yet," I admitted. "Part of me wants to walk away from all of it, sell my shares, dissolve my connection to the Winters name completely, start fresh somewhere new. And the other part?" I stared out at the moonlit water, trying to articulate the competing impulse stirring within me. "The other part wants to step in, to take the reins of the company and the trust. Not out of revenge or to hurt Gabby and Susan, but because maybe I could do something good with it. Something meaningful." Liam nodded thoughtfully. "Your grandfather seemed to think you could." "He had more faith in me than I have in myself," I said softly. "Maybe it's time to borrow some of that faith," Liam suggested, "to see yourself through his eyes, just for a while." We fell silent again, the rhythmic sound of waves and the distant call of a night bird, the only sounds disturbing the peace. I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me, replacing the tumult of emotions that had been churning since I first saw my seat assignment in the hallway. "I think I'll contact Vincent Gregory," I said suddenly, the decision crystallizing in my mind. "My biological father. I want to hear his side of the story before I decide anything else." Liam glanced at me, his expression unreadable in the moonlight. "That makes sense. He might have insights about your grandfather, about the company, that could help you decide what to do next. And about me," I added quietly. "About where I come from, who I am apart from the Winters name." We stayed on the deck a while longer, talking intermittently about everything and nothing. law school memories, Liam's current cases, my photography projects. It felt normal, comforting, a necessary counterbalance to the extraordinary events of the day. When I finally went up to bed, exhaustion crashed over me in waves. I barely had time to slip under the covers before sleep claimed me, deep and dreamless for the first time in years. I woke to sunshine streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee wafting from downstairs. For a moment, I was disoriented. The unfamiliar room and the events of the previous day seeming like fragments of a strange dream. Then, reality reasserted itself, and with it came a surprising sense of clarity. Today was the first day of my new life. Whatever I decided to do with my inheritance, with the trust, with Winters Holdings, those decisions would shape not just my future, but the future of everyone connected to the Winters name. It was time to step out of the shadows and into the light. Time to claim not just my inheritance, but my place in the world. After a quiet breakfast with Liam, homemade waffles and strong coffee on the deck, the lake shimmering in the morning sun, I finally steeled myself to look at my phone. Switching it off airplane mode unleashed a flood of notifications. 27 missed calls, 43 text messages, and 16 voicemails. Most were from Susan, her messages growing increasingly frantic and then coldly threatening as the hours passed. "This is childish behavior, Brianna. You have no idea what you're doing. If you proceed with this nonsense, you'll regret it. The board will never accept you. You're making a fool of yourself." Thomas's messages were fewer and more measured. "Please call when you can, Bree. Susan is very upset. Perhaps we can discuss this calmly. I understand you need time, but please let us know you're safe." Most surprising were the 3 messages from Gabby. "What the hell did you do? Mom is completely losing it. Thanks for ruining my wedding and the aftermath. Call me. Not Mom. Just me. We need to talk." I scrolled through them all, feeling strangely detached, as if reading about someone else's family drama. Then I noticed a text from an unknown number that had come in early this morning. "Bree, this is Austin Henderson. Renee gave me your number. When you're ready to talk, I have information that might interest you about the family business. No pressure, no agenda. Just think you deserve to know everything." That was unexpected. I showed the message to Liam, who raised his eyebrows. "The plot thickens," he said. "Think it's legitimate? Or a ploy from your mother or sister to draw you out?" I considered the possibility. It feels genuine, and Renee struck me as someone who sees through the Winters facade. If she gave him my number, worth following up on then, Liam agreed. "But not today. Today you were going to call Vincent Gregory, right?" I nodded, pulling the business card from my purse. Vincent Gregory, CEO, Gregory International Consulting. The card listed an office in downtown Chicago and a direct mobile. "Number." My finger hovered over the digits. What would I say to this man who was my biological father, a stranger whose DNA I carried, whose existence had been systematically erased from my life? After a moment's hesitation, I dialed. He answered on the second ring. "Vincent Gregory." His voice was deep, authoritative, but not harsh. I found myself momentarily speechless. "Hello?" he prompted. "Mr. Gregory," I finally managed. "My name is Brianna Winters. I believe you know who I am." A sharp intake of breath, then silence for several seconds. "Brianna," he said finally, his voice softer now. Yes, I know exactly who you are. Thomas gave me your card. Yesterday. He said you wanted to meet me." "I've wanted to meet you for 28 years, he replied, emotion evident in his voice. Are you open to that possibility?" "I am," I said, surprised by my own certainty. "I have questions." "A lot of them, I'm sure you do." A pause, then. "I'm actually not far from Chicago right now. I have a lake house in Harbor Country. Where are you? I glanced at Liam, who had moved to give me privacy, but remained within eyesight on the other end of the deck. I'm in Michigan, as well, near South Haven. That's less than an hour from me, Vincent said, sounding genuinely pleased by the coincidence. Would you consider meeting today? I could drive to you or meet somewhere neutral, whatever makes you comfortable. The prospect of moving so quickly was daunting, but something in his voice, an earnestness, a barely contained hope, made me agree. There's a coffee shop in South Haven, on the harbor, Dockside Coffee. Would that work? Perfectly. What time? We settled on noon, giving me a couple of hours to prepare myself. After ending the call, I rejoined Liam. He wants to meet today, I explained. In South Haven. Liam nodded. Do you want me to come with you? I considered the offer. Having Liam there would be comforting, a buffer between me and this stranger who was somehow not a stranger. But something told me this first meeting needed to be just between Vincent and me. I think I need to do this alone, I said. But thank you. Of course. I've got some work I can do here. Just call if you need anything, okay? The drive to South Haven was beautiful, winding roads through forests just beginning to bud with spring green, occasional glimpses of the vast blue lake. I borrowed Liam's car, a sleek silver Audi that handled the curves with ease. Dockside Coffee turned out to be a charming cafe with a wall of windows overlooking the harbor where colorful sailboats bobbed at their moorings. I arrived 15 minutes early, selecting a corner table with a good view of both the entrance and the water. I ordered herbal tea, too nervous for caffeine, and waited, trying to quiet the butterflies in my stomach. What did I hope to gain from this meeting? Information, yes, but also something less tangible. A connection to a part of myself I'd never been allowed to know, perhaps. At precisely noon, a man entered the cafe. Tall, trim, with silver hair and a face that bore the dignified signs of age while retaining a youthful energy. He wore casual but expensive-looking weekend clothes, dark jeans, a light blue button-down, a navy blazer. Our eyes met across the room, and something passed between us. Recognition on a level deeper than memory or knowledge. He approached slowly, as if afraid I might disappear if he moved too quickly. Brianna, he said when he reached my table, my name almost a question. I nodded, standing. Vincent. For an awkward moment, we simply looked at each other, neither sure of the appropriate greeting. Then he smiled, a warm, genuine smile that transformed his serious face. You look exactly like your grandmother, he said softly. My mother. She had the same eyes. The simple observation touched something deep within me. All my life, I'd been told I didn't resemble anyone in the family. Not Susan with her perfect features, not Thomas with his distinguished bearing. To suddenly have a point of connection, a genetic heritage I could see and acknowledge, felt like a missing puzzle piece sliding into place. Please sit, I said, gesturing to the chair opposite mine. He ordered coffee, black, and for a few minutes we engaged in awkward small talk about the weather, the lake, the charming town of South Haven. Then, as if by mutual agreement, we moved to deeper waters. I've followed your career, Vincent said, surprising me. Your photography is extraordinary. You have a gift for capturing the essence of a person, the truth beneath the surface. I blinked, caught off guard by both his knowledge of my work and his thoughtful assessment of it. Thank you. Photography has always been my passion, even when my family considered it an unsuitable profession. Susan always did care too much about appearances, Vincent remarked, a hint of old pain in his voice. I imagine she preferred for you to pursue something more conventionally prestigious. She wanted me to go to law school, follow in Thomas's footsteps, I confirmed. I tried for a while. That's how I met my friend Liam, who's become my attorney. But my heart wasn't in it. Vincent nodded, understanding in his eyes. Harold once told me that true success comes only when you follow your genuine talents, not when you force yourself into a mold others have created for you. The mention of my grandfather created an opening for the questions burning inside me. You knew him well, didn't you? Grandpa Harold. Very well, Vincent confirmed. He was my mentor, my friend. In many ways, he was more of a father to me than my own had been. He took a sip of his coffee. That's partially why Susan and I connected initially. We both orbited Harold's world, both sought his approval. And then I happened, I said quietly. Vincent's expression softened. You didn't just happen, Brianna. You were created, and while the circumstances were complicated, you were never a mistake. Not to me. Then why did you leave? Why didn't you fight for me? The questions tumbled out before I could stop them, raw and plaintive. Vincent set down his cup, his face grave. That's the story I've waited 28 years to tell you. Vincent took a deep breath, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup as he gathered his thoughts. I met your mother at Winters Holdings. I was Harold's protege, being groomed to eventually take over the company. Susan was Harold's daughter, brilliant and ambitious, determined to prove herself in what was still very much a man's world. He smiled faintly, remembering. We were both in our 20s, both eager to impress Harold, both working impossible hours. It started as friendship, mutual respect, then something more. But you were engaged to someone else, I prompted, recalling what Thomas had told me. Vincent nodded. Rebecca, my college sweetheart. We'd been together for years. We're planning our wedding. But things had been strained between us, and the more time I spent with Susan. He trailed off, then met my eyes directly. I'm not proud of what happened, Brianna. The affair was wrong, a betrayal of Rebecca's trust. But when Susan told me she was pregnant, I was ready to take responsibility. What do you mean? I broke off my engagement to Rebecca. I went to Susan and told her I wanted to marry her, to raise our child together. His expression darkened. She laughed in my face. I blinked, surprised. What? Susan had never seen our relationship as anything serious. For her, it was a diversion, perhaps a small rebellion against Harold's expectations. But marry me? Have a child with me? That was never part of her plan. Vincent's voice held decades-old pain. She informed me she had already worked out a more suitable arrangement. She was going to marry Thomas Winters, a man from the right social background, with the right connections. He would adopt the baby as his own, and no one would ever know. The truth. But didn't you fight back? Try to claim your rights? I asked, struggling to understand. Vincent's eyes clouded with old regret. I did, at first. I went to Harold, told him everything, begged for his support, but Susan had gotten to him first. She convinced him I was unstable, obsessed with her, making up the paternity claim to force her into marriage. He shook his head. Harold didn't believe her completely. He knew his daughter too well for that. But he also wasn't willing to risk a scandal that could damage the company or his family's reputation. So he sided with Susan, I said, the familiar feeling of disappointment settling in my chest. Not exactly, Vincent replied, surprising me. He proposed a compromise. Thomas would still marry Susan and legally adopt you, giving you the Winters name and all its advantages. I would step back, not contest the adoption. In exchange, Harold would ensure I could be part of your life in some capacity, as a family friend, perhaps, or a distant uncle. He stared out at the harbor, his expression distant. I didn't like it, but I thought it was better than nothing. At least I would be able to know you, to watch you grow up, even if you didn't know I was your father. But that didn't happen, I said, the pieces falling into place. I never even met you until today. Vincent nodded, his jaw tightening. Susan had no intention of honoring that agreement. Once she had what she wanted, marriage to Thomas, control of the Winters name, and you, safely adopted with no legal connection to me. She shut me out completely, changed her number, refused my calls, threatened restraining orders if I tried to see you. And Harold allowed this? After his promise to you? A bitter smile crossed Vincent's face. Harold loved his daughter despite her flaws. And by then, I had left Winters Holdings, started my own consulting firm. I wasn't part of his daily life. Anymore? Wasn't there to remind him of his broken promise? He paused. Though in fairness to Harold, I think he tried in his own way. He would occasionally mention you during our infrequent meetings, show me a school photo Susan had given him. It wasn't much, but it was something. So you just gave up? I couldn't keep the accusation from my voice. Vincent flinched slightly, acknowledging the hit. Not entirely. I hired private investigators to follow your progress from a distance. I knew which schools you attended, saw photographs of your graduations. I sent birthday cards every year through Harold, though I don't know if you ever received them. I didn't, I said quietly. I suspected as much. He sighed. When you turned 18, I tried to contact you directly, sent letters to your college address. Did any of those reach you? I shook my head, thinking of all the mail my mother had helpfully collected and sorted during my college years, ostensibly to make things easier for me. After several failed attempts, I decided to respect what I thought was your choice. I assumed Susan had told you about me, and that you had decided you wanted nothing to do with your biological father. His voice grew softer. It was painful, but I told myself it was your right to make that decision. But it wasn't my decision, I said, anger building not at Vincent, but at Susan, at the systematic way she had erased this part of my history. I never knew about you. Never knew I had another father. They let me believe I was Thomas's biological daughter my entire life. Vincent's eyes widened. You didn't know? At all? Until Thomas told you yesterday? No. I knew I was different, that I didn't quite fit. But they never told me why. He looked stricken. Brianna, I'm so sorry. If I had known, if I had any idea, they had kept the truth from you completely, I would have tried harder, done more. I took a sip of my tea, now cold, giving myself a moment to process. What changed? Why did you reach out to Thomas recently? Harold's death, Vincent replied. When he passed away 6 years ago, I lost my last tenuous connection to you. I respected the boundaries for a while longer, but as I entered my 60s, I found myself increasingly unwilling to go to my grave without at least trying once more. He offered a small, sad smile. Life grows more precious as you get older, and with it, the relationships that truly matter. So you contacted Thomas. Yes, I'd heard through business circles that things weren't entirely harmonious between Susan and him. I thought he might be more receptive than she would be. I've been reaching out periodically for several months, becoming more persistent as Gabby's wedding approached. He paused. I knew you would be there, and I hoped Thomas might arrange for us to meet, however briefly. But he didn't, I said. Not until yesterday, after everything fell apart. Vincent looked puzzled. What exactly happened yesterday? Thomas was vague on the phone, just said there had been a situation at the wedding and that you were finally ready to learn about me. I considered how much to share, then decided on the truth. All of it. I told Vincent about the hallway seating, about finding the jewelry and the will in the attic 2 years ago, about confronting my family at the wedding and reclaiming what was rightfully mine. I told him about Austin and the text messages, about Thomas revealing the full extent of my inheritance, control of the family trust, and finally, about coming to Michigan to process everything that had happened. Vincent listened without interrupting, his expression shifting from surprise to anger to something like pride as the story unfolded. When I finished, he sat back in his chair, shaking his head slightly. "You are definitely Harold's granddaughter," he said with a small laugh. That blend of principle and strategic thinking. Pure Harold Winters. You don't think I overreacted? Making a scene at Gabby's wedding? From what you've described, they created the scene, not you. You simply stood up for yourself after years of being marginalized. He leaned forward. And I'm glad you did. Not just because it led to us finally meeting, but because you deserve to claim your rightful place in that family and that company. I studied him, this stranger who was my father, trying to reconcile the years of absence with the evident care in his eyes. Did you know about the trust, about Grandpa Harold leaving me controlling interest? Vincent shook his head. No, Harold never mentioned that to me, but it doesn't surprise me. A thoughtful expression crossed his face. Harold was a shrewd judge of character. If he chose you to lead the trust, he must have seen something in you that the others lacked. But I know nothing about running a business, let alone one as complex as Winters Holdings, I admitted. I'm a photographer, not a CEO. Perhaps that's exactly why Harold chose you, Vincent suggested. You bring a different perspective, an outsider's eye. And you have something Susan and Gabby have always lacked, genuine empathy and integrity. He hesitated, then added, I could help you if you wanted. Not to take over or interfere, but to advise. After all, I've spent the last 30 years building and running my own successful company. The offer hung between us, tempting and terrifying at once. This man, my biological father, was offering me not just a connection to my past, but potentially a partner in navigating my future. Could I trust him? Should I? Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with an incoming text. I glanced down to see another message from Austin. I need to meet with you urgently. Susan and Gabby are planning something. Tomorrow at the latest. It concerns the trust. I looked up at Vincent, a decision forming in my mind. Perhaps it was time to stop running and start confronting, not just my past, but my future. I think, I said slowly, I'm going to need all the help I can get. Vincent, and I spent another hour at the coffee shop, our conversation shifting from the painful past to the uncertain future. I showed him Austin's text, explaining what little I knew of the Hendersons, Austin's apparent integrity, Renee's perceptiveness, their clear distaste for Gabby's manipulations. The Henderson connection could be valuable, Vincent noted, nodding, thoughtfully. Henderson Tech has been a potential acquisition target for Winters Holdings for years. If Susan and Gabby were pushing for a merger through the marriage, then they've lost that leverage now, I finished. But what would they be planning regarding the trust? And why would Austin warn me? Vincent's expression grew serious. There are legal maneuvers they might attempt, claiming you're unfit to manage the trust, filing for temporary control while challenging the will. None would likely succeed in the long run, but they could tie things up in court for months, even years. I thought of Liam, waiting for me back at the lake house with his legal expertise. I should get back and discuss this with my attorney. And respond to Austin. Vincent nodded, standing as I did. I understand. He hesitated, then added, Brianna, I know this is all very sudden, and I don't expect you to trust me immediately. But I hope this might be the beginning of something, not just a one-time meeting. Looking at him, this stranger with my eyes, my grandfather's strategic mind, and 28 years of thwarted attempts to know me, I felt something shift inside. Not forgiveness exactly, for a wrong he hadn't fully committed, but openness to what might be. I'd like that, I said simply. He smiled, relief evident in his expression. Here's my card with my personal number. He scribbled something on the back. And this is the address of my lake house, in case you need me. I'll be staying there at least through the weekend. We parted with an awkward but genuine hug, the first physical contact with my biological father in my adult life. As I drove back to Liam's lake house, my mind raced with all I had learned, all that might still happen. When I arrived, Liam was on the deck, laptop open, surrounded by legal documents. He looked up as I approached, concern evident in his expression. How did it go? Better than I expected, I admitted, sitting beside him. Vincent seems genuine, and he offered to help me navigate the Winters Holdings situation. I pulled out my phone, showing him Austin's message, which might be more urgent than we thought. Liam frowned, reading the text. What do you want to do? Meet with Austin? I think I have to, but not alone, and not without preparation. I glanced at the documents spread before him. What have you been working on? Getting ahead of whatever Susan might try. He turned his laptop toward me, showing a legal filing. This is a petition to officially recognize you as the controlling trustee of the Winters Family Trust, based on Harold's will. If we file this first thing Monday morning, it establishes your claim before Susan can contest it. And if she tries to challenge it, she'd be fighting an uphill battle. The will is clear, and as Harold's direct descendant, the courts will favor your claim. He hesitated. But litigation could still drag on for months. The ideal scenario would be to assert control quickly and decisively enough that challenging you becomes impractical. I nodded, thoughts coalescing into a plan. I need to meet with Austin, find out what he knows. Then I think I should return to Chicago. Not hiding, not running, but ready to take control of what's mine. When do you want to meet Austin? I typed. A quick response. I can meet tomorrow morning. Where and when? Austin's reply came almost immediately. 10 a.m., the Henderson Pavilion at Millennium Park. Will be alone. I showed Liam the response. The Henderson Pavilion? That's a public space donated by the Henderson family, Liam finished. Smart choice. Very public, neutral ground, but with the Henderson name attached. Symbolic territory. You've thought about this a lot, I observed. With a small smile, Liam shrugged, a hint of color touching his cheeks. Professional habit. I analyze everything in terms of positioning and leverage. He closed his laptop. So tomorrow morning we meet Austin, then head back to Chicago? We? I assumed you'd want me there as your attorney. His expression grew uncertain. Unless you'd prefer to meet him alone? I shook my head quickly. No, I want you there. I just didn't want to impose on your weekend any more than I already have. Bree! Liam's voice was gentle but firm. You're not imposing. This is important, and you shouldn't have to face it alone. Something warm unfurled in my chest at his words. Throughout this whirlwind of revelations and confrontations, Liam had been my one constant. Steady, supportive, never pushing, but always present. Thank you, I said simply. We spent the rest of the afternoon and evening preparing, reviewing the documents Thomas had given me, outlining potential scenarios for Monday's board meeting, drafting statements I might need to make. As the light faded from the sky, we moved from legal strategy to personal conversation, sharing a simple dinner on the deck as stars began to appear above the lake. Do you think you'll reconnect with Vincent? Liam asked as we lingered over glasses of wine. Beyond just professional advice, I mean. I considered the question. I think so. It's strange. I've spent my whole life feeling like I didn't quite belong in my family, and now I understand why. There's something validating about meeting him, seeing parts of myself reflected in someone else. I traced the rim of my glass. He seems to want a relationship, not just a business connection. And is that something you want too? I think it could be, I admitted. though it's complicated by the winter situation. I don't want him to think I'm only interested in his help with the company. Liam nodded thoughtfully. You could always separate the two. Personal relationship now, business discussions later, once things with Winter's holdings are settled. That's probably wise. I smiled, grateful for his insight. You always see things so clearly. Not always, he murmured, his gaze meeting mine for a moment before shifting back to the lake. But I try. Something unspoken hovered between us. Something that had been building, perhaps, since the first day we'd met in law school. But now wasn't the time to explore it, not with so much still unresolved, so many decisions yet to be made. Morning came with a sense of purpose. We packed our things, Liam carefully securing all the documents in his briefcase, and headed toward Chicago. The drive took just under 2 hours, the city skyline rising before us as we approached. Millennium Park was busy with Saturday morning visitors, families with children, tourists taking photographs against the backdrop of the famous Cloudgate sculpture, runners circling the paths. The Henderson Pavilion stood at the eastern edge, a graceful structure of glass and steel that served as both architectural landmark and performance space. We spotted Austin immediately, standing alone near one of the pavilion's curving walls, gazing out at the park. He was dressed casually in jeans and a light sweater, sunglasses shielding his eyes from the bright morning light. He looked nothing like a man who had nearly gotten married the day before. No visible signs of distress or regret, just a contained alertness as he scanned the approaching visitors. When he saw us, he straightened, removing his sunglasses and nodding in greeting. Bree, thank you for coming. His eyes shifted to Liam, a question in his gaze. This is Liam Garrett, my attorney, I explained as we reached him. Anything you have to say to me can be said in front of him. Austin nodded, seeming unsurprised. Of course, probably wise, given what I'm about to tell you. He gestured to a secluded bench nearby. Shall we? Once seated, Austin got straight to the point. Susan and Gabby are planning to have an emergency board meeting on Monday morning. They're going to try to remove Thomas as CEO and install Gabby in his place, consolidating their control before you can assert your claim to the trust. I exchanged a glance with Liam, whose expression remained professionally neutral despite the alarming news. How do you know this? I asked Austin. Gabby called me last night, he explained. Despite everything, she still thinks I can be manipulated, that I'll help her if she acts apologetic enough. A hint of disgust crossed his face. She explained the whole plan, thinking I'd be impressed by her strategic thinking. She doesn't know I've been aware of her manipulations for months. Why are you telling me this? I asked directly. Why help me instead of them? Austin met my gaze steadily. Because I've spent the past year watching how they operate. The lies, the manipulations, the disregard for anyone who stands in their way, and I've seen how they've treated you. He shook his head slightly. My mother raised me to recognize integrity when I see it, and to stand against injustice when I can. His answer seemed sincere, but caution made me press further. And there's nothing else? No other motive? A hint of a smile touched his lips. Well, I'd be lying if I said there wasn't some satisfaction in undermining Gabby's plans after what she tried to do to me. But mostly? He shrugged. It's the right thing to do. Liam leaned forward. What exactly are they planning for Monday's meeting? They've been quietly lobbying board members for weeks, promising various incentives for support, Austin explained. The official reason for removing Thomas will be erratic decision-making and failure to protect the company's interests, basically blaming him for giving Bree information about her inheritance. Do they have the votes? Liam asked. It's close, but I think so. Most of the board members are longtime allies of Susan's. I considered this information, trying to see the angles, the possibilities. What about you? What's your role in their plan? Originally, I was supposed to provide Henderson Tech's endorsement, adding credibility to their move. Austin's expression hardened. But that's not happening now. In fact, I have a counteroffer for you. A counteroffer? I asked. My interest piqued despite my wariness. Austin nodded, leaning forward. Henderson Tech has been considering a strategic partnership with Winters Holdings for months. That's partly why Gabby was so eager to marry me. But I'm offering you that partnership directly, independent of Gabby or Susan. Why would you do that? Liam asked, his tone professionally skeptical. 2 reasons, Austin replied. First, it still makes business sense. Our companies have complementary strengths and markets. Second, he paused, his expression hardening slightly. It completely undermines Susan and Gabby's leverage with the board. I considered this, seeing the potential. The board might be more hesitant to oppose me if Henderson Tech is backing my leadership. Exactly, Austin confirmed. My mother is prepared to issue a formal statement supporting your claim to the trust and expressing Henderson Tech's eagerness to work with you specifically. Liam looked thoughtful. That could change the calculus for board members who are on the fence. There's more, Austin continued. Several board members who pledged support to Susan did so because they believed I would bring Henderson Tech into a merger only if Gabby had significant control. When I clarify that's not the case, their allegiance might shift, I finished, seeing the strategy. Austin nodded. I've already spoken to 2 of them who seem willing to reconsider their position. I glanced at Liam, whose slight nod told me he saw the value in this alliance. Still, caution made me ask, what do you want? In return, nothing unreasonable, Austin assured me. Just a seat at the table as we discuss potential collaborations, and your commitment to consider our partnership proposal in good faith. I thought of Vincent, of his offer to advise me. With him and the Hendersons supporting me, perhaps I could actually do this, take control of Winters Holdings and reshape it into something better. I'd want to bring in Vincent Gregory as an advisor, I said, testing Austin's reaction. Surprise flickered across his face. Vincent Gregory? The founder of Gregory International? How do you know him? He's my biological father, I replied simply, finding it easier to say the second time. Austin blinked, processing this revelation. That's unexpected, but potentially very advantageous. Gregory International has an excellent reputation. Liam and I exchanged glances. This alliance was taking shape, pieces falling into place with surprising speed and coherence. I'll need to formalize everything with my legal team, I said. But in principle, I accept your offer. Austin smiled, relief evident in his expression. Excellent. I'll have my mother call you this afternoon to discuss details. As we stood to leave, Austin held out his hand. For what it's worth, Bree, I think your grandfather chose wisely. Winters Holdings needs exactly the kind of fresh perspective you'll bring. I shook his hand, feeling the weight of responsibility and possibility settling on my shoulders. I hope you're right. As we walked back to Liam's car, I felt a curious lightness despite the challenges ahead. For the first time, I wasn't facing the Winters family alone. I had allies. Unexpected ones, but allies nonetheless. Ready to go back to Chicago? Liam asked softly. I nodded, my gaze fixed on the city skyline. Yes, it's time to claim what's mine. Monday morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through the windows of my downtown hotel suite. I stood before the full-length mirror, hardly recognizing the woman who stared back at me. Gone was the burgundy dress of Gabby's wedding, replaced by a tailored charcoal suit that projected confidence and authority. My hair was pulled back in a sleek professional style, and around my neck hung my grandmother's pearls, no longer just jewelry, but a symbol of my rightful inheritance. You look ready, Liam said from the doorway, his reflection appearing behind mine in the mirror. I took a deep breath. I hope so. The weekend had passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Vincent had joined us yesterday, bringing decades of business expertise and insider knowledge of Winters Holdings. Renee Henderson had called as promised, her support clear and unwavering. By Sunday night, we had a comprehensive strategy and confirmation from 3 board members who had switched their allegiance from Susan to me. "The car is waiting," Liam informed me. "Vincent and Austin are already at the office." Winters. Tower rose 40 stories above Michigan Avenue, its gleaming facade a testament to my grandfather's vision and success. As our car pulled up to the entrance, I felt a momentary flutter of anxiety. "Remember," Liam said quietly, "you're not asking for permission. You're taking what's legally yours." The executive floor was hushed and elegant, the boardroom at its center like the heart of a beehive. As we approached, I could see them already gathered through the glass walls. Susan and Gabby seated side by side, Thomas at the head of the table looking tired and resigned, the 12 board members in their places. Vincent and Austin stood off to one side, their presence clearly unexpected by my mother and sister. When I entered, Susan's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed with fury. "What is she doing here? And with him?" She pointed accusingly at Vincent. Didn't answer immediately, walking calmly to the empty chair at the opposite end of the table from Thomas. Liam took position behind me, a silent support. "Good morning," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I believe you were planning to discuss the future leadership of Winters Holdings. As the controlling trustee of the Winters family. Trust, I should certainly be part of that conversation." Susan stood abruptly. "This is absurd. She has no authority here." "Actually," Liam interjected smoothly, distributing folders to each board member, "Ms. Winters has every authority. You'll find Harold Winters' will clearly designates her as the controlling trustee, effective on her 25th birthday. That was 3 years ago." Chaos erupted as board members flipped through the documents, exclamations and whispered consultations filling the room. Through it all, Gabby stared at me with cold hatred, while Susan appeared nearly apoplectic. Thomas finally raised his hand for silence. "It's true," he said simply. "Harold left controlling interest to Bree. Susan and I withheld this information, wrongfully." In the stunned silence that followed, I stood, channeling every ounce of my grandfather's confidence. "I have no intention of disrupting the day-to-day operations of Winters Holdings. Thomas will remain as CEO, though I'll be taking a more active role as board chair." I looked directly at Susan, then Gabby, keeping my voice level. "However, there will be changes. Transparency, accountability, a return to the values my grandfather built this company on." As the reality of their defeat settled over them, I felt no triumph, only a sense of rightness, of things finally falling into their proper places. In the family drama that had defined my life for 28 years, this wasn't an ending, but a beginning. My beginning, on my own terms. "The board meeting will proceed as scheduled," I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. "Let's begin. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us."